verse 15, is to speak the truth in love. Because in verse 25, towards the end of the chapter, he repeats it. He says there, the same idea, quoting actually a verse in Zechariah. He says, therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you, with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. So let's just focus on this whole idea, okay? This maturity, this lack of deception, this sound doctrine is all about our ability to speak the truth in love. Now, I don't know about you, but I know myself and looking around me at other people. Some people are really good. I'm one of these on the truth part, you know. I like truth. I like doctrine. I know how to see things. I have discernment. I can put you in your place. I can say this is right, this is wrong. But I often lack on the love side. Speak the truth in love. You have to know how to speak to people, when to speak to people. You have to pray and make sure it's that God wants you to speak to them. There are certain things we don't have to pray about. We need to correct others when it happens, but nevertheless, we need to speak the truth in love. Others are really strong on the love side. And my wife is like this. We're such a good pair together. She has such concern and sensitivity for people, which is wonderful. But sometimes she can go to have a really crucial conversation with someone and be so sensitive that, you know, you get to she hasn't spoken the truth part until there's only 5 minutes left on the clock, and it's a little bit too late. So we all need this balance in our personalities. It's also a cultural thing. You know, different cultures handle these kind of difficult conversations, speaking the truth in very different ways. As many of you know, my testimony, my life, I'm a Jewish guy who was born in America. You hear me speaking with an American accent. That's where I was born and raised. Came to the Lord in Japan. My second culture and language is Japanese. I was a Japanese teacher. I'm an interpreter, a translator. I love Japan. Came to the Lord in Japan many years ago. That was my first language of worship, and Bible study was in Japanese. And then my next culture, if you will, is Israel, Hebrew. After that, you know, I tell people in my 20s I learned Japanese and Japan, and in my 30s then Israel and Hebrew. And in my later 40s, China, and I got a little bit of China in me, but not enough. But Israel and Japan, they're really like my official or unofficial cultures, let's say. And boy, are they different on this issue. Israelis are really good at telling you like it is, okay? Speaking the truth, all right? Speaking their minds directly right at you. I remember when I was first a new immigrant here way back in 1992. And I was in the Ulpan, as we call it, which is the Hebrew language school for new immigrants or foreigners, whoever wants to learn Hebrew. And I'm taking the bus back and forth every day. And one day I'm sitting on the bus, and back then they had on the Egged buses some seats up front where two seats faced each other, or two pairs of seats. There were 4 seats, 2 each facing one another. And I'm sitting there across, and there is a grandmotherly lady. And she's kind of looking at me like this, kind of looking me over. And I kind of become aware that she's looking me over. And she barks out in a pretty loud voice, and it would happen to be very quiet at the time. She says to me in Hebrew, and thank God my Hebrew was good enough to understand. She looks at me and she says, "Hey, young man, you know, your pants don't match your shirt, or your shirt doesn't match your pants," or something like that. And of course, I looked down, and all the people around also looked at me, and sure enough, she was right. Whatever I was wearing, the color, the patterns, it wasn't a great match that day. But she had absolutely no problems just telling me, a complete stranger, in a loud voice, what she thought of my color patterns and ability to dress myself, okay? And I could tell you 100 other stories that I've experienced here in Israel, that as an American, half Japanese, I go, wow, hi, nice to meet you too. People just out of nowhere just telling you what they think, all right? It's speaking the truth, but maybe with not so much love. Now, on the other hand, my Japanese side, God bless all of you Japanese who are listening out there and anyone who has ever been to Japan. The Japanese are very sensitive and very polite and very loving. But you can sit down with someone for 4 hours and they'll just beat around the bush and you won't get to what is the truth, what's really bothering them. I had a brother in Japan who, it turns out I did something that offended him, and he didn't talk to me, no, we talked, but it took him 10 years before he was able to bring that up with me, to speak the truth. And it was too long. And it wasn't, in my eyes, it wasn't that serious or weighty a thing. But nevertheless, it was hard for him to bring that up, okay? So there's also cultural factors and how we're able to bring up and have these difficult conversations. But this is what it said. Put away falsehood. Learn in marriage. This is so important for couples. It's so important in churches and congregations. Learn when something bothers you, there's a problem. You can't just stuff it. You got to pray about it. And then learn to speak the truth in love with that right balance. And that is how we are going to be protected from believing wrong doctrines, okay? It's not just up here. It's in here and how we relate to one another.